big story in Washington on Thursday, and that's the Supreme Court's ruling in the affirmative action case, where they held that admissions programs at Harvard and the University of North Carolina that relied in part on race violated the Constitution. The president addressed the nation yesterday, and here's his reaction from the White House.
We cannot let this decision be the last word. I want to emphasize, we cannot let this decision be the last word. While the court can render a decision, it cannot change what America stands for.
So Jennifer, you're a lawyer. Two questions here. Is affirmative action on in college admissions for African Americans dead? And two, the president says we cannot let this decision be the last word. How?
I am in neither the camp that this is the end of affirmative action, great thing, or in the camp that says end of affirmative action, terrible thing. I think what Roberts did was he left a giant loophole that admissions officers are going to drive a truck through. And that was the portion of the opinion which, interestingly, Biden read from, that said nothing in this is going to prevent schools from considering students' stories of overcoming adversity, whether it be socioeconomic or racial. So what we are now going to get is a flood of woe is me applications, not only from African Americans, but from everybody. And we're going to hear exactly what the Supreme Court apparently doesn't want to hear, that people have been victims and that they have, here's all the bad things that have happened. Here's all the things I've done to overcome them. They have set out a roadmap for another game of racial gamesmanship, which I don't think is particularly healthy. And they've done this because they refuse to acknowledge that there is systemic racism which affects everyone in society. It's not enough to be Black, in their view. You have to be Black and then prove up the fact that you've been discriminated against. You can be from Idaho, and that a priori is a fine reason to get in the university because we want geographic diversity. But to be Black, you have to show grit. You have to show that you have overcome something. And that's this dichotomy that they've set up. It is not intellectually consistent, frankly, because if you're using race, you're using race. And secondly, it's going to create more chaos, more gamesmanship. And so the president, I think, rightly says there are ways, frankly, around this. And Chief Justice Roberts laid out the game plan. He pointed in the direction. This is how you do it. And he said a couple other things that I think were very important. One is you can have socioeconomic affirmative action, and you can really look at some of these categories that are, frankly, avenues for discrimination against African Americans. If you are looking at Harvard alums and their kids, if you are looking at donors, those groups are overwhelmingly white. And by allowing universities to select from them, you're allowing them to give preference to a pool of potential applicants that are overwhelmingly white. The Supreme Court doesn't really care about that. It just recognizes that. It doesn't see that systemic racism has created a pool of advantaged people. But that doesn't mean we should tolerate it. That doesn't mean that the Justice Department and universities should allow that to continue. That's true of donors. That's true of legacy members. So I think some things that the Supreme Court would rather just overlook because it just assumes that's the way things are, or it's perfectly legitimate to recruit from states that have 99% white applicants. Those things I think are going to get a second look. So I think it now becomes, frankly, another round of litigation, another round of confusion in the ranks. And I would not want to be a college applicant or their parent. I'm very glad my last child just graduated from college.
Yeah.